Okay, so welcome back to Mirror Modal Dev. I am just playing around with Transformers.js, so this isn't going to be some sort of detailed walkthrough or anything. We're really just kind of messing around with it. So to kind of recap a little bit of what we tried last time, I'll pull over the demo that we were looking at, but we're not going to stay here for too long. Um, So we went last time to Transformers.js to the documentation, and I mentioned that, um, let's see here, where is it listed? Somewhere down here is listed sentiments analysis, which kind of, the further I dig into it, the more this feels like the hello world of using Transformers.js in the browser. Transformers.js is a library that lets you run uh, large language models inside of your browser. So you can also run them on the server side as well. But what I'm really trying to constrain this to at the moment is just understanding like what are the use cases for running a model in the browser, given that models generally are absolutely huge and require a large download and then a ton of memory to actually work well. So somewhere in recorded videos on this channel before, I've talked about working with Olama to build applications that have a local dependency on a language model, but that's getting like the full compute power of your local machine. Whereas if you're trying to run Transformers.js in the browser on the client side, then you're constrained to whatever the constraints might be for a browser tab. So the reason I'm curious about that is that it seems like there should be some sort of use case for it, and I want to know what it is. And we see a lot of these different little toy apps, but I'm not totally convinced that, beyond a nice hello world, that they're going to be super useful. So I'm just trying to go a little bit deeper just to see like what we could actually do with it. So we'll give this a second to see if it's still working. This is a demo from last time, so if it's broken by now, that's fine. Let's see if we're waiting on anything here. Okay, yeah, that's expected. Okay, cool. So this is part of the issue, right? Is when you first, like I just mentioned, the massive download size for most models is going to be pretty intense, right? So, generally speaking, we're trying to keep assets in a website or a web app down to, kilobytes if we can, megabytes if we have to. Whereas like you tend to measure model size in terms of like how many gigabytes or fractions of a gigabyte, right? So like some of the smallest ones are still that I've played around with so far are still going to be like 135 megabytes or 360 megabytes. It's just quite a lot on page load. So you can see you kind of have to sit there and wait for it. But then, so for sentiment classification, this seems to be like the hello world for using this. But at the same time, it, at least based on just the simple code that we're given, just to run the demo app, it's not terribly useful as is. And I would say that Transformers.js is not negative or positive, and this seems to be awfully confident that it is negative for some reason. And then adding an exclamation mark makes it positive. I'm sure there's ways to finesse this, and maybe we would if this was a use case we were interested in. But it is just neat to see that something is happening here, even if we don't think it's great. So, for example, okay, I despise is great. I found, okay, a little less positive or in terms of confidence there, but it's still positive. So anyways, this is that demo. And then what really kind of, one thing that got me like really curious about this was just trying to do a vocabulary explorer where I wanted to generate example sentences from a chosen word. So let's see here. without digging out the repo for it, this actually loaded pretty quick because I guess I've already cached it, which is nice. The model I'm using for this, by the way, would normally take over a minute to download, which is clearly unacceptable in production. But I was just curious to see how far I could push it, just to, as a science experiment, I suppose. So the whole prompt here is that I pass in a vocabulary word, and then it should give me an example sentence using that vocabulary word. It has failed to do so even for ocean, right? So nowhere in here do I see the word ocean. Let's just try something else like omnipresent, and then we'll hit generate. And it came back with something pretty quickly, but wait, didn't it? Okay. A great white man arrived at my apartment and proceeded to his way into the door. Okay, so like whatever this is, it would require potentially a lot of work. But this is using text generation, which it turns out isn't particularly great in the browser where constraints are so tight. For a couple of reasons. One, the amount of input that you can give this is to the amount of input that you can give to the model is quite limited, just for this use case alone, right? So of course I have a prompt that I'm using in the code that embellishes on what I want and what this whole application is supposed to be doing, but it's still just given that one word not enough apparently to get it to do much. And again, these are tiny models, so it's hard to get them to follow an instruction where it creates something useful. So it starts to feel like maybe, the simple, more like judgment use cases, if you will, are a little more apparent. So I've seen some where it's like in object browser detection or background removal from images, where essentially you're asking the model to make a judgment on what it sees, and then from that you can pass off data to the code itself and have it do something with that. So that's what I wanted to play around with today. And again, this is just me playing around live. This is not some sort of pre-baked demo. So, just kind of in midstream here, what I've been playing around with was, I don't know why I picked this story, but this is like a tiny diary of clues and quiet moments from a kitty that is taking notes about stuff. So you can see here in the corpus, there's all these different notes that I've put together. Each one of these, some of them are short, some of them are not. So what I might do just to start off with beforehand is we'll ask this to, over here we have VS Code and the code base. This is an XJS app. So before we get into what it's doing, I'm just going to ask it to do something that's going to take a second anyways. So let's see. How do I want to phrase this? I'd like you to make it possible to show a modal that contains the single note that we click on. That modal should be launchable from both the corpus or the results page. And when we click out of the modal, we should dismiss it. Let's see how far that gets us. And in the meantime, assuming that it doesn't start coding and doing a whole bunch of stuff, what we'll do here is you can see that the status is idle. So what this repo is doing with Transformers.js is it's doing embeddings, or also labeled as feature extraction. So it's going to take all of my corpus of documents here and create embeddings or vectors out of them, so that then I can run queries or string search against those and find notes that are similar in some way. So I'm just gonna hit this build index real quick. Obviously this isn't a UX that you would want to ship, requiring the user to click rebuild an index or whatever, but for our demo this is fine. Again, we're just playing around, seeing what's possible. So the the idea in this little demo for the notes is that it's a little character that is taking notes just about her daily life, yet also someone at some point took a strawberry shortcake, and she's also collecting notes about that to see if she can put together like who took the strawberry shortcake. So again, I have no idea why I landed on this one, but it just kind of sprung to my mind. Um, well, I have an 8-year-old, so I think I know why this was on my mind. But anyways, let's just try something like I don't know. There's a couple of examples I put in here. There's like who took the cake. So let's just try that and see if it turns back anything interesting. You can see we're getting real-time results over here because all of the documents and the embeddings are loaded into the browser. And we'll look at kind of, oh, well, see, this is why I was kind of in two minds about trying to code this while it's working, because it's going to keep refreshing and we'll lose our embeddings. But so I'm going to give it a second. I think in a real world, we might, obviously cache this and then give the user maybe a trigger to reload. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a tricky problem. I have an email client that I use in the browser that will let you click download, presumably to do something. I don't think it's using transformers or anything quite that smart, but it'll let you download the documents from or just like your emails into the browser so that you can then get better search somehow. But I've never actually gotten it to complete the download stage. So there's some like pretty tricky problems within, once you have a ton of documents. But I think in some ways, like as I'm playing around with this could be one avenue for adding some very local, not so smarts to say like an in-browser coding environment or a writing environment or something like that. So it's not completely contrived. There would be use cases for this. I'm not sure that keeping a diary is necessarily one of them, but it could. Another one that I thought about just kind of randomly was there's probably something cool you could do with like a personal wiki like Obsidian, where you could build a sidecar, or maybe I think they have plugins, but you could probably build something like that. That wouldn't necessarily require Transformers.js, because I guess maybe you're not in a browser, although I suppose for some reason I think Obsidian is Electron, but I'm not sure. But anyways, some of this stuff could make a lot of sense to do locally and in a browser context, but this example is going to be pretty contrived. Okay, so it's getting it so far. The reason I'm asking it to do this is that as we start trying search results, I just want to see like, if we get something that's a little bit longer, it'll start to truncate, and then I just want to click through and see what's in there. So hopefully we're almost done here. We're not using shadcn this time, so I suppose it is just inventing its own modal. Okay. All right, just for fun, we're going to restart the server and then we'll reload here. So let's build the index again. And then we'll try typing a query. Okay, so who took the cake? Theoretically. Yeah, so we can click through and find out. So what it's doing is it's, we can set how many results we want to get back. And then type in a query and to see. So cake was there early in the morning, but by mid-morning it was gone. You can see we're getting similarity scores over here as well. So this is like kind of getting a notion of like how closely it matches this search query. And then you can see here as well, like, so I keep thinking about the kitchen feels different without the cake. By the way, you can probably imagine how I put all these like mini documents together. I just gave the scenario over to a chatbot and had it fill it out. So it's kind of some of the things it typed. I'm finding surprising and funny. Um, the box was a small thing, but it made the room feel complete. Now the table looks too empty and too quiet. If someone took it because they were hungry, I hope they enjoyed it. Still, I wish they had left a note. Okay. Let's just type this and see. Oops, friends. I'm not sure. Yeah, so some of this is friends. So again, like this is just someone. Uh, um, it's kind of going out of its way to match on friends since that's all it's got to work with. But I'm trying to think of like something that would be useful. Let's see if this does anything. Hanging out with friends. All right. So this is pretty good. Similarity scores are going to be relatively low, I suppose, but you know, you can see what it's matching on here. Um, and these are all tiny, tiny documents, which I suppose makes it slightly one easier to manage, but also like harder to figure out where the strong signal is um, for raising one doc as opposed to another. All right, so we'll have a look over here just to see um, how we got the application set up. So this is just a off-the-shelf Next.js app. So we just did the regular sort of create next app npm script, and then went through here, and we just got, you know, a basic entry point for the page. So once we go to index, you can see it's sitting here. Our whole corpus of documents are here. Nothing too crazy. So we're pulling that in here, and then we put it into the UI further down. And then the main thing is that we've put all of the Transformer.js stuff onto a worker just to kind of let it work, stick it into a singleton, and then kind of work with it that way. So one of the things I think I want to do next time around is just kind of come up with some knobs to kind of play around with, like levels of chunking and that kind of thing, to see what ends up making a difference. I think having a larger corpus, like currently we're just kind of at 31, but having a larger corpus and then much larger docs and kind of playing around with, you know, really trying to get to the heart of something useful in terms of search results is going to be really important. So we might try to, like, for example, you know, add something that will be harder to search for, or maybe that's like very specific that we can search for, and see if the embeddings can help us pull that out. As a matter of fact, let's just try that now. I want you to go into the corpus and add a document that gives us something very specific to search for. And this is just a way to see if our embeddings are helping us helping us find like a needle in a haystack kind of thing. So why don't you go ahead and create that document and tell us what might be useful to search for, and just see if we can get that to pop up to the top of our results when we rebuild the index. Okay. So I added a new document. Let's reload. Oh no, it's already in here. Okay, cool. So we'll rebuild the index. And then we will, okay, great. So let's try this. Ren loft key. All right. So it's pulling that to the top of our results with a pretty high similarity. And then let's just see what this does too. Okay, great. So let's say, for example, we were searching for this and so we've got, actually, we're going to try a simpler thing. Just give us a few less words to scan for visually. Okay, so we've got Renloft key. Somehow or another, this one ended up popping up, although the similarity score is quite low. So that's probably something where maybe this is more noise than signal. Obviously, in this case, it is, right? We built like a kind of contrived document specifically to see if we could get it to pull up, and it's been successful in doing that. So probably we'll want to have a way to, let's add some sort of threshold. So let's ask and just see what our options might be. Currently, we're surfacing as many results as the user sets for the top K field. So by default, that's currently 5. However, there are situations where we're searching for something specific and there are going to be mostly junk results towards the bottom. What would be a reasonable similarity threshold to set so that we can try to help the user zero in on signal, filter out the noise, and yet try to avoid accidentally cutting anything out of the results that would otherwise be useful? Like in a situation like this, I know these numbers are quite small, but we can see here that this one is similarity, so 0.61, which is pretty high. Whereas like then there's an immediate drop down to like 0.15, and then we eventually tail off with 0.07. Okay, so it's recommending a good starting threshold for cutting for cutoff would be somewhere around here. Yeah, so we could do something that's just a hard threshold. I think what it's recommending here is a bit smarter, which is going to be within X% of the top score, which I quite like that one. And then this is just a fallback in case we don't get anything. At least we could try showing something. So let's see. We'll go with those two. So a relative cutoff and then a fallback in case nothing comes through. We'll just see how good we can get in terms of something that feels useful. So kind of coming back to for a moment while we're waiting, like some of the things that Transformers.js can do. Probably should have taken the hint last time. Again, the text generation example wasn't going to work out for us. Like it kind of never really felt like it was going to be viable. So I wanted to focus on something that was more useful. So it seems ultimately like instead of creating something, more like kind of making a judgment on an existing thing feels like more of the right move. So again, like you can see here, text classification. And while it doesn't specifically mention it by name, sort of in the question answering, I suppose, but what we're doing is feature extraction. I'd be interested to see how well it could handle summarization and translation, because that's taking something that's there and turning it into an equivalent, either kind of shorter or translated, presumably into another language, which is actually something I need to try for real life purposes anyways. Okay, so implemented the relative cutoff. Let me come back into the browser then, and we'll reload you. Same here. Build the index. And then let's type the word, whoops, ren. Okay, so pretty cool. And you can kind of like watch in real time if you can see the score here in the corner, the similarity score, as we type more, and we're matching pretty hard on a string in the document, that the score is going up. Although interestingly, the didn't really help us too much, but I guess that's just such a generic word. But it also got rid of all of the other things that it wouldn't have been, right? So we had junk results earlier, because this is the only document by definition that would have anything to do with this particular topic, because that's the way we set it up. Let's try something where there's a lot more documents about it. So let's see. There were friends hanging out. Okay. And you can see here, since we're doing the relative window, we start out relatively low anyways, because I doubt that any of these are using like hanging out. So this one's almost like a mismatch, right? These aren't friends hanging out, they're friends who were out. So kind of a fun thing to have to think about is like how to handle nuance like that. So let's try this instead. And so this one, for example, this one shows up, but I'd probably argue that this one should also be in there too, and it's not. So we'd have to come up with strategies for how to be a bit more inclusive about interpreting the user input as well. But still, this is quite nice. So just as something that just like we whip together vibe coding like super fast, it's again, all we're trying to figure out is what can Transformers.js excel at in the browser that would actually be useful. And this feels potentially like something that we would want to use, but it would require a lot of finesse on top of it, including we'd probably just want to put some sort of like fuzzy search in the mix as well, and figuring out like, okay, how do you add vibe query and fuzzy query together to like come up with like results, and how do you rank them next to each other and that kind of thing. So still a lot more that we would want to do if we put this into an application, but as a start, it feels like a lot closer than, say, this vocabulary explorer, where asking it to do text generation based on one word was having it fail, even though it takes a minute or more to download the model that is failing. So anyways, I'm going to leave it here today. Thanks for checking out Mere Mortal Developer and following along. And if you're using Transformers.js for anything useful, that is on its way to shipping, I would sure love to know about it, especially if it's running in the browser. Just super curious what people are doing with it in a production environment. All right, thank you. See you next time.